Hello and welcome to the Star Trek Wars podcast, Picard edition. I'm your co-host Jordan, and I'm trying to keep a straight face because Joselyn is losing it. And I jumped the shark because joining me as always is my co-host Joselyn. Joselyn, would you kindly turn down your boombox? You're distracting.
Okay, I'm giving you a gesture. I think you know what it means. Because, yeah, and that is the okay sound, because it's A-okay with me if I turn this down.
It's very punk rock of you.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's get into this week's episode. It is Picard, Season 2, Episode 4, entitled The Watcher, written by Travis Fickett and Juliana James, and directed by, and this was an oversight on my part last week, I meant to mention, Leah Thompson, who is famously known most famously for being Marty McFly's mom, who Marty McFly has to avoid her macking on him in Back to the Future. So she has...
she's come a long way.
She has, yes. This was it.
Yeah, I guess everyone's forgotten the whole, tried to bang my son thing, but...
Is it Kevin
remember.
Kline? Is that what he's wearing? And she thinks his name is Kevin.
Yeah, that she thinks that's what his name is.
That's such a good movie.
Let's review that movie instead.
We should. That could be a Patreon special. We got to do random Enterprise episode this summer, and maybe Back to the Future. And speaking of Back to the Future, we have some time travel paradoxes and confusion that we'll get into here.
Yes.
But first, let me give you a summary of this week's episode. With time running out to save the future, Picard seeks out an old friend for help. Rios winds up on the wrong side of the law, and Jurati makes a deal with the Borg Queen. And I say Jurati because every podcast I've listened to calls her Girardi, and it's driving me a little nuts. So I will now butcher at least 5 names in this podcast. But
yeah, but not that one. Isn't there a famous Girardi? Is that why?
Joe Girardi was a catcher for the Cubs and the manager of the New York Yankees. Is that what you're thinking of, Jocelyn?
Could be.
That's pretty... Okay.
Sports facts.
Sports facts. Well, Jocelyn, let's start off actually by our first impressions of this week's episode and kind of what you thought. We're in the 4th episode here. I think the first 3 were pretty strong. What did you think about the 4th outing here?
Oh, boy.
Okay. Well, that says a lot.
Yeah, I think, so in the cadence of every story, there's the setup, you learn the characters, then you finally discover the journey that your characters are going to go on, and then they get into the journey, and there's this part in storytelling that is categorized as fun and games. And it's when we know the characters, we know what their journey is set out to be. We know what their goal is, and then we get to have a little fun before things get really serious, and we have the dark night of the soul, and then the hero, in the hero's journey. I think this episode was supposed to be fun and games, and it was just chaos and disappointment for me.
Okay.
For the most part. I am not even sure what happened in this episode, and I watched it. So I think there was some good stuff in there. There was some stuff that wasn't so good, and then there's stuff I'm just genuinely confused about that maybe if we clarify will change my general feeling, but it just felt like chaos to me.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It's kind of like a middle movie in a trilogy, which can sometimes be very good, but in this case, just more setup, but confusing setup. So I don't think we're supposed to know where it's going, but there is kind of a beauty in not knowing where something's going and being able to discuss potential outcomes and where we think the story is going and who the Watcher might be and all of that, but only for a short period of time. That gets old very quickly with me, especially after Discovery, where it's a lot of setup, and then you don't get the payoff till the very end. I think Picard's done a much better job of paying certain things off. And
they have a total different pacing, this show.
Yes.
Up to this point, anyway.
Yeah, and I felt last week was a little bit of filler, but some fun and games.
Yeah.
And this week, it was more just games than fun. But let's get into our pros and kind of talk about what worked for us this week. Actually, before we do that, there's a lot of discussion about timeline. So
Okay.
I want to just quickly discuss the timeline. And essentially, at least my understanding of what's happened is Q has moved Picard right before he starts to self-destruct on the Stargazer. Right before it explodes, Q moves them to a different timeline. We'll call it the Confederation timeline. And then within the Confederation timeline, they move back in time. So they're still in that timeline just prior to this convergence. And that's kind of what's confusing, as I say, there's like 3 hours before this convergence takes place, which makes us seem like they've moved back into the prime timeline before the convergence, but I believe they're still in this Confederation.
But we're still in this alternate timeline.
And by them fixing that convergence point before that takes place, they kind of, I guess, reset the timeline to an extent. Maybe it fixes both timelines. The other confusing thing to me that I don't want to bring up more confusion is what happened to the Picard and Seven and Rafi of this timeline? Because obviously there was a Seven who was the president. And so it's kind of like a mirror situation where they've taken their doppelgangers' places in this timeline. But I don't think that those characters were moved to a different timeline, unless Q swapped them and they're like about to die in our timeline. I don't think that matters, but the thing that matters is we're in the Confederation timeline in 2024 trying to fix time before this convergence takes place.
Trying to stop the Confederation from happening,
correct.
Right?
And so Time's Arrow did not happen in this timeline. So Mark Twain never met Guinan. Guinan never met Picard in San Francisco in the 1800s.
Right. That's what I assumed.
And the Colonel's secret recipe is still safe, which is a very
Thank God.
inside joke. Because if you've watched Time's Arrow or listened to our coverage of Time's Arrow, Mark Twain is very Colonel Sanders. And yeah, we had a lot of jokes. There are some
not as good of a storyteller, but
there's some fan theories about what's going on and who the Watcher is and things that we'll get into towards the end of this episode. I'll save that for the end because I know some people don't want to be spoiled, and I don't want to spoil people on it, even though some of it probably is not true. But there's some interesting things to discuss there, which is kind of the best thing that came from this episode for me is just the discussion around it. And having Star Trek like that, we don't know what's going to happen to talk about,
right?
Which is pretty cool. But that being said, Joselyn, let's jump into your pros and kind of what did work for you in this episode.
The whole concept of this episode worked for me. Like as you described it from like the IMDb page or whatever, like the synopsis, it sounds like a lot of fun. Like, okay, Rios is getting into deeper trouble with who will be his love interest for the season. Jurati and the Borg Queen have this, like, frenemies thing going on. And we're, like, wondering, will Jurati just give herself over to the Borg because she's so lonely and dark and a murderer? Raffi and Seven together because there's tension there. There's, like, all kinds of tension there, basically, that they need to work through. And then also Picard and Jurati suddenly in France for a little while. Anyway, on the base level, like everything sounds... We get a young Guinan that is objectively interesting and exciting. And so kudos for the idea. Kudos for like the skeleton, the bare bones. I think it was just the dressing of all of this that maybe didn't quite make it. So I liked that. I obviously, and of course, when they were on the bus and the Mohawk guy, which I am hoping, I could not validate this anywhere, but that's gotta be the same actor, right?
Yeah, that is Kirk Thatcher, who was in Star Trek 4. He was actually a producer on Star Trek 4.
That's right. Famously, he was a producer on there. Okay.
And he is listening to the same song that he listened to in Star Trek 4, just a slightly updated song, which is a song that he sings in his band, so in real life. So he wrote that song. So yeah.
There's just like so much to love about that moment because it's a tiny bit. It's not like a total deep cut of Trek, like you would be familiar with it, but like also knowing that it's the song, knowing that it, was the same guy, like just knowing those things. There was like levels to it. The scene played out in a way that I don't know if I got the joke exactly. I think what it was supposed to be is like the last time someone told him to turn it off didn't end well for him, so he backs down like right away.
Yes.
Which is funny. That's pretty funny. It just took me a while to figure that out. I don't know why. But I loved seeing that. I thought that was super fun.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah? Maybe not. No.
I'll talk about it.
You don't like it?
I liked it mostly. I'll get into it. I'll let you continue with your pros.
Okay. Well, we could draw this out a little bit because I don't have a lot. And that's not because like I didn't like hate this episode or anything. I still enjoyed watching it. I just can't like think of a lot of things to point to where I'm like, that was really cool or I really enjoyed this. This episode for me just kind of happened. And I was there and I was watching it, but nothing really like
resonated with you.
Got me. Yeah.
So I'm about a minute late on this joke, but you're saying that there was like a lot of layers to that guy, like an onion, perhaps.
Yeah.
So actually, I have a clip of that song that he was listening to on the boombox.
You do? Oh, that's great. No.
Okay, I think that's all we can play for copyright reasons. So yeah, sorry, I was a little distracted trying to pull up Smash Mouth, which now I have to burn my phone.
That song for this show, that's like our version of Rick rolling.
It is.
We basically, we just
Rick rolled
everybody.
Replaced. Rick's been rolled.
Yeah.
By Smash Mouth.
Rick has been rolled. I don't know what we would call it, but you've been smashed. Don't take that out. Geez. It's so bad. I thought 7 looks gorgeous. That's a pro.
Okay. You're grasping.
The end.
Okay.
Let's move on.
So I'll start
Maybe
with
I'll
some
think
pros
of more.
and some neutral zones, and you can jump in if something grabs you. There are a lot of references. The show has been very referential of itself and its Easter eggs, and just like, hey, this was in TNG. So like Agnes calling or Girardi calling Picard Dixon Hill, I guess, just a well-known detective in the 25th century, because he would cosplay like as Dixon Hill on the holodeck.
Oh, then, yes, I forgot about that.
Mm-hmm. So did Whoopi Goldberg or Guinan. Because it never happened.
She did.
Because she used to go like in the holodeck with him, and they're doing Dixon Hill, and then the safeties get turned off. So there's been a few episodes. They that was very early TNG, and then they kind of get away from it. You see him obviously in First Contact, where he's in the holodeck shooting Borgs with a Tommy gun, which is just an incredible scene. And I can't believe those are words that I said, but that happened in a movie, and it was awesome.
It did. Whoever
wrote that is just a genius. Like, so you'll be shooting Borg with what, a phaser? No, a Tommy gun. Like,
it won't do a Tommy gun, I think.
Adapt to that.
Keeping it classy.
Oh, and they landed, they referenced they landed on April 12th, which is just, we all know, an extremely famous day for many, many reasons.
Because it's your birthday.
Oh, it is. Oh, that's right. I was going to go somewhere else with it, but now that you mention it, that is my birthday. And
it's famously your birthday.
Famously, it's the day I recorded the first Star Trek Wars podcast with Jeremy was on my birthday. And
my goodness.
Did not tell him it was my birthday because he's like, okay, we're going to record. How about April 12th? I was like, that is my birthday. That is perfect. What else?
I will say nothing.
What I like to do on my birthday than record a Star Trek podcast, that is probably the number one thing. So
obviously.
It was a lot of fun. The Borg Queen and just her nefarious nature. I think probably the highlights of this episode for me and some of last week too was the interaction between Girardi and the Borg Queen and just how manipulative the Borg Queen is, but also how manipulative Agnes is, and kind of the similarities between the two to an extent, and how much like mutual respect there is between the Borg Queen and how much mutual hate there is between, or just hate from Jurati. And she's just playing games with the Borg Queen. And the Borg Queen's like, "You've impressed me." Like she said, I think that was last week. But it's interesting to see where that's going to go. I think they're going to share many more scenes together for sure. There's also a line here from Picard where they're kind of in France, where they're at his vineyard. And he's talking about how the Picards had to leave France and they went to Britain for like generations. So finally, there's like an explanation for Picard's Britishness.
Yes.
So after
you're right.
years
That
and
was
years.
very good.
So I like that.
Yeah.
And Rafi, actually, this is the only time I'm going to mention her in my prose. She utters a line that Discovery could benefit from in high-stakes situations. "No time to explain." Like, I love that line in this because there's not like a stop and let's explain everything while we save the universe when things are about to blow up. And like, I'm defusing a bomb.
Snippet from
there's
my
20
childhood.
seconds left. Is like, yes, when I was a child, my father did not take me to medieval times like he said he was going to. And that is just devastating. It's like the MacGruber vignettes that you send me where he's like trying to disarm a bomb and then he stops to explain something. I'm like, "MacGruber, it's about," and it just blows. Like, that's how I feel with Discovery sometimes.
Oh my God.
So that was very refreshing to hear this week. Neutral zone wise, they play at doing like Star Trek 4, that Star Trek 4 bit, but like even the punks are vastly more considerate in this future/past, and it doesn't really make sense because like this timeline they're showing like the doom and gloom, but like the punk is like the one person that is actually considerate, and it was funny and cool to see that same actor and he's reprising this role. I felt they could have done something different with it or something more with it, and it was good for a laugh and it was cool to see, but it's just a weird reference to make right there, and for Seven to just ask him to kindly turn off his boombox and he does. But seriously, like, who's using a boombox on a bus in 2024?
It was very much shoehorned in there.
I feel that way, yes.
And again, I'm not into it. I just
it's neutral zone. I mean, it's kind of pro, but also neutral zone. Like, I thought they could have done it better. And nearly
I agree.
Like 38 years basically from Star Trek 4 for this guy, and he's still on a bus every day listening to the same song on a boombox.
Yeah.
I'm sure someone would have smacked him around at several times, because if you're on a bus in public listening to a boombox, like, come on.
No.
Just think of the D batteries. Like, we had a cassette player when we were kids that had like 6 D batteries or 8 D batteries.
Yeah, you had to like load them in.
In 2024, that's probably like $50 worth of batteries, and it's going to last maybe 30 minutes before it's dead. So,
yeah.
I don't know what this guy does for a living, but he must be loaded.
It's got to be with D batteries.
And why do the aging bit with Guinan if you're not going to use Whoopi Goldberg as Guinan? That was very bizarre. And like Jeremy even referenced, like, hey, they're going to do this because maybe they'll show Guinan in the past, and she's explained why she looks older now, so she can look older in the past when we see her, and it's not going to be weird. And then they just recast Guinan, which is very bizarre.
Which I thought that they would do that. Like, I expected young Guinan.
I expected de-aged
I'm
Whoopi
into
Goldberg.
it. Oh, you expected like a CGI situation.
Yeah, like they did with Q in the first episode, like they do with Luke Skywalker.
But that was like a moment. If you did that for like entire episodes, I think it gets quite expensive.
It does. I think you have to lessen the amount of screen time that she has and get creative with it, and they have money. I mean, I pay for Paramount Plus. Well, I mean,
they got Starship.
You pay for Paramount
money.
Plus.
Oh yeah, Paramount Plus.
So.
They got that Paramount Plus money.
That's right.
Yeah, I did expect a young Guinan, but it was ruined for me because after the Mohawk guy moment, I wanted to look him up to see if he was the same guy, just to validate my suspicions. And then I saw, this person, so-and-so as Guinan.
Like,
and I was like, oh man, I ruined the reveal for myself. Because I was looking it up in real time, which is a bad thing to do.
It is.
When you're watching anything. Like, just don't do that.
Or like when you watch on Amazon and you pause, it shows like the IMDb like thumbnails of who's in that scene. And it's like, oh, come on.
And sometimes they haven't walked into that scene
Exactly.
yet.
Yep.
And you see them and you're like, nah, man.
Yep.
They're about to get like bamboozled because that's the bad guy and he's in this scene, but they're at the good guy's hideout. Oh no.
Mm-hmm.
That's literally never happened that way, but it's just an example.
I've definitely had that happen before. It's annoying. And I turn it off. Tricorders are just iPhones now. Like I remember when Star Trek did stuff that was like futuristic. And now it's just like, we're going to take current tech and that's futuristic. It's like, no. I don't know. It's just not as innovative.
Also, it's not like even the newest iPhone.
No.
It's like the 3GS. It's big. It's in an OtterBox, and it only has like 3 colors.
Okay. How many gigs is it though? Or terabytes? Or that's what I need. I need more storage, not more colors.
I need like 12 terabytes.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds like a lot, but I need it.
I do too.
Tired of running out of storage.
What is on your phone that's taking up that much space?
My ideas.
That's a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
Mine is
it's full of ideas.
Mine is videos and pictures of my children mainly. It takes up a lot of space. And it's hard to delete, Jocelyn. Like you go back, it's like, oh, baby picture of my 6-year-old child in a strawberry outfit and a tutu. And it's like, I can't delete that picture. It's backed up in 4 places, but I can't bring myself to put it in the trash can. The icon's a trash can. I'm not going to put my baby girl's picture in a trash can.
You can't. Don't put baby in a trash can.
Even the digital one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have we learned
nothing?
It.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's most the neutral zone stuff. I mean, the tricorders being an iPhone in that time could be explained as like it blends in and doesn't look like a tricorder. But I don't think anyone in LA is going to look at you sideways if you have a large portable device that you're scanning things with. Like, I think that's just normal.
No, I think you're close enough to Silicon Valley that they just think you're beta testing something. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's most of the pros and neutral zones that I can think of offhand.
Okay.
I think we can go into cons here in a minute. And I think we just kind of do what we did last week and just do a character breakdown of kind of what every character's doing this week and maybe what we thought about it. Because, again, not a ton of pros, not a ton of cons. This is more of a filler episode and more of a setup and, like, try to get you intrigued for what's going to happen next week. The pacing definitely slows down. And then there's just kind of like a weird end to this one where it's just, hey, we're going to take you to the Watcher, but you're not going to really see who the Watcher is yet. We're not going to explain anything. And then here's the scene with Q that's going to confuse you even more.
Sure. So, okay, I forgot to do my neutral zones.
Oh, go ahead.
So I'll lead my cons with the neutral zones to lessen the blow. I am confused. Is Laris not the Watcher?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, the Laris could potentially be an avatar for the Watcher, but I don't think the Watcher is going to be Laris. That would be kind of weird. It could be. Not
actually Laris. It's clearly not Laris.
Yeah,
but it's like the alternate timeline version of her back in
I would think it's got to be like some manifestation that they're using just to make Picard comfortable with meeting the Watcher.
Oh, you think that's what it is?
I would think so. I could be wrong, but I don't think like Laris
that is smart.
Is the Watcher.
No, I didn't think about that.
And then has just been chilling on a vineyard trying to mac on an 80-something-year-old man for the last few years.
I think he's like 93.
Is he 93?
Picard is.
Or 83?
Is he? I think he's like 90-something.
Okay, you might be right.
We're going to have to look that up.
I don't think so, because Clint Eastwood's 91. And I don't know. Picard just looks.
Yeah, but Clint Eastwood is, not a great guy. It ages you, being a bad person.
Being a bad person.
I did not get the ending with Q, which it sounds like maybe I'm not meant to. Who's he talking to? Why? Why does she ignore him? And his powers are gone. Which is interesting. Where is he? Because he's got a Europa like badge on.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not in 2024. I'm very confused. And then neutral zone, I put Guinan in neutral zone because I get that like young Guinan would be like more fiery than like wizened 400-year-old Guinan. But it was kind of jarring to meet Guinan in that way. You know, a character that like we really love, and she's so different. And maybe it's meant to be, and like over the course of the next few episodes, we're going to understand that more. I mean, I don't blame her for being angry. But I don't know. It was just very intense, and I wasn't expecting it, I guess, maybe is what it is. But it's new. That's why it's neutral.
I might be able to shed some light on that for you, Jocelyn. Obviously, Whoopi Goldberg has The View and other things that she's doing. She's not getting any younger, which is really the direction they want to go with the new Paramount Plus series, Young Guinan. So, yeah.
No. There's a Young Guinan series?
I just saw it on Twitter.
No.
No, I'm just kidding. But
oh my God.
That's just a CBS joke that me and Jeremy make all the time because there's young Sheldon and there's young Rock Sheldon. And everybody hates Chris. And it's just like, let's take a famous person and show you them when they were a kid. And make them little? And less interesting.
Okay.
And annoying.
Oh my goodness. I fall for it every time.
I know.
I just need to remind myself you're literally never telling me anything that's true.
It's very true.
All right. Those are my neutral zones. I'm going to jump into my cons. First con. Cristobal is not a weird name.
Depends on how you say it.
Clearly.
Clearly.
Yeah, exactly. Good one. I just don't think there's any reason for the light. And what does it add? Like, are we going for a joke there? Like, I don't know why I was so undelighted by that. Seven jumps into a police cruiser and she can't drive a car, and yet she drives it insanely well and fast and maneuvers like, a stunt double car driver person, which is who was probably driving at the time.
I can explain that too.
Okay.
Seven, with her trying to become more human when she was on Voyager, she did a lot of research. And there was one Tom Paris on Voyager who loved automobiles. And he recommended a movie called Fast Seven. Is that what it's called?
Oh.
Fast and Furious 7? I think it's just called Fast 7. Because at this point, they've given up on naming those movies. Now. And then the eighth one was just like F8. It's just like, F it, we're out of names.
You know what we mean.
So yeah, she watched Fast 7, and that's why she knows how to drive so well.
Because she saw them driving. Mm-hmm. That makes so much sense.
She learned from the best.
Because otherwise, it makes no sense.
This is true.
Because, like, I get into a rental car, and it takes me hours to like not jam on the brakes too hard or accelerate too fast or too slow, like to learn my bearings. I've been driving for like decades, at this point, and I can't drive like that.
Yeah.
And so for someone to get into a police cruiser for the first time and be like, I mean,
it'd be a little different.
If the car chase had been more fun to me, I probably would have overlooked it.
Or if she would have hit something at some point or banged into something.
Like a bunch of stuff. I wanted this car to be messed up. Yeah. I wanted like skidding. I wanted like bumpers flying off. I wanted like, and why didn't they put their lights on? Just put your lights on. Mm-hmm. People stop when your lights are on because you're the cops.
They didn't know about that. They knew about everything else.
How did they not know about that?
They knew about stoplights, but not police lights.
Exactly. What does the yellow one mean? I can't.
Depends on what country you're in.
It's very true. Girardi and Picard they drop them off in LA, and then inexplicably, because I don't remember why, they go to France.
Check out the vineyard.
And They're just kind of checking out the
Some
vineyard.
old wine there.
Picard's like, hey, I live near here.
Story time.
In France. And then they get out, and Girardi moves an abacus, which, again, an old-timey abacus in this 2024 I just don't. And then
Been there a long time.
There's apparently an Encyclopedia Britannica, which I don't know if you remember, Jordan, but we had a
whole
set
bookshelf
of encyclopedias.
Yeah. It was our internet.
The 15th. Yeah, there was pre-internet. She chooses the 15th volume, which I don't even know if it works like that. And then she chooses a bottle of wine that's from 1915, which was literally like the bottle of wine sitting on top. Anyway, the whole 15 thing and being like, I think your brain is trying to subconsciously tell you 15. Oh, 15. It was a stretch.
It's kind of like watching that, what's that Jim Carrey movie, number 23 or something? It's like,
oh, what was that? I think
it's called The Number 23 or something of that nature. Like, 7 times 3 plus 2, it's 23. Whoa. Like, okay, well.
Oh, yeah, everything was like 23. Yeah. There was a theory there for a while that like everything ended in 23, which should be scary because it's going to be 2023 next year.
Sequel.
I know. Now I'm just worried. I'm worried every year, though, so it's fine. The 15 thing was not really believable for me, but the most unbelievable part about it, I get abandoning a house. It's a lot of work. I don't want one. But abandoning good wine, French wine, 100-year-old French wine, that's a criminal offense, I think.
You know what's better than...
I think you can be prosecuted under the law for that. And you should be.
But you know what's better than 100-year-old wine?
What?
300-year-old wine.
Oh, I think that's too old.
Is it? Okay, well.
Yeah. There's like a thing with wine. It's like 100 is good, 300 no.
Okay. It depends on how you store your wine.
I have no idea. I've never had 100-year-old wine. Are you kidding me?
I don't think they had wine 300 years ago, now that I think about it. It's a pretty new thing.
Yeah, I think it's a new thing. Yeah, it's like a brand new thing that we made up. It's like kombucha. Yeah. Those are all... Oh, okay. Last, because I just had to cut it off at some point, the ICE agent. I have no love for ICE. Like, don't get me wrong. But this guy was just like comically villain.
Yeah.
It was like he was out there living, like soaking it up. Like, I just love
no subtlety.
Putting people in.
I love being evil.
There was no subtlety. There was no nuance. There was no like, because you could have done it. You could have had like this. You just could have done a lot of things, and instead you went like Disney fairy tale cartoon villain with him, which was a strange choice. Also, having Rios detained by ICE in the first place, I think as a plot development, I think they did it because it's like premonitions of the Confederacy, like, wait, what are they called? The Confederation? Sorry, the Confederation.
Close enough.
Same. Yeah, same difference. I get that. Like, they needed that element to show, like, I guess, how we could so easily progress into this, like xenophobia and things like that. But to play it so comically was almost like a disservice to how subtle and pervasive, like, it can be. I don't know. There's just a lot of things that I wish were just slightly different about this episode.
I agree. Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I am of the same mind that a lot of what this episode does could be done by most modern TV shows, which is where Star Trek kind of loses its interest. Is like it's not telling modern day problems in a futuristic setting; it's telling modern problems in a modern setting, which is what NCIS can do, or Law and Order can do, or any show that's on CBS that old people watch. Rafi is a con for me this week, and mainly just because her arc this season is fueled by Elnor dying, which I kind of understand, but it's just right at the point where they were starting to get interesting together and having some chemistry, and her arc in the first season is very much the same. She's like this angry, bitter person who's mad at herself for bad decisions that she's made, and we kind of see this probably stems from her relationship with her son not being great, which we'll probably never see him again. And, kind of looking at Elnor as almost like a son, and now he's gone. But she's just like unhinged. She's mad at everything. And her relationship with Seven is just her yelling at Seven the whole time in this car chase scene that takes up almost all of their screen time, except for exposition scenes where they go to the police station and they're like, your friends, first they go to the med clinic and the nurse or whatever is like, your friend's been taken by ICE. They're like, oh, dang, I guess we know who that is. And she's like, you better find him. We know what that
is. We're not confused at all.
Yes, we know that acronym. And then she's like, you better find him before ICE takes him. It's just like, okay, well, we get it. And then they go to the police station. And like, we don't have him in our system. And then like that most helpful stranger, like, where are these people? He's like, hey, if your friend's taken by ICE, you better go to the ICE detention center here on 5th Street and get him back before he's gone forever by ICE. It's like,
exactly.
Okay.
He was this close to offering them the rest of his sour cream onion chips too. Like, this guy was very helpful.
Too helpful.
I like to think he was like one of those defense attorneys that's just like waiting for someone to get arrested, and he's like, I'm their lawyer,
Yeah, pro bono guy.
Yeah. Pretty great.
Yeah, that was very nice of him. And one of my biggest pros too is same as you. Seven learned how to drive real quick. Like, I can buy Rafi hacking into a vehicle, especially like vehicles with OnStar and remote unlock with the tricorder.
Yes.
But then
I had no problem with that.
And then Seven just inexplicably being the best stunt driver ever. And you always have to go down a one-way street the wrong direction in a chase scene.
Always.
Because it adds tension, I guess. But then for this chase scene to go that long, and like, why do you watch a chase scene? For the crash at the end that you know is coming. Same reason you watch NASCAR, if you ever watch NASCAR, because you want to see a crash. And there's no crash.
Goodness, is that why people watch that?
For the most part. I can't think of any other reason.
They watch it for a crash? People get hurt.
Sometimes. Yeah, that's true. They're much safer than they used to be, but yeah.
Are there like just a ton of bad people in the world?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
I mean, you're not rooting for someone to get hurt, but it's like a train wreck, like you can't look away, that type of thing. But this car chase scene, I could have not only looked away, I could have fallen asleep because nothing happens. Seven is swerving in and out of traffic expertly. And she doesn't even put the car in drive and accidentally go forward. Like, she just downshifts, goes reverse, goes into drive, and just, she knows what she's doing.
How?
Yeah. I don't know. And I think this episode takes itself too seriously, and not having Elnor, like I mentioned last week, hurts because you don't have that comical character that is...
Yeah.
Like, these characters fit into this universe too well.
Yeah, they do.
Except for Rios, who's kind of found himself, in a detention center after getting a concussion. It's more explainable. Great. But for Seven and Rafi and the way Rafi's acting, for her not to get caught or to have like this disregard for her own well-being when she knows the transporter doesn't even work yet is really dumb.
Right.
And I know...
Right. It's really taking away some of the enjoyment of like a fish out of water story. And we don't have like now that comparison because Seven is having the time of her life in this era. She's in this timeline specifically. She is loving this. And if everyone else were kind of floundering more, it would really like create a contrast to that. That would be very interesting and cause some tension of its own, and I feel like we're getting robbed of that too.
Yeah, there's like no awkward scene where anyone has to explain why they look the way they look, because everyone is pretty much human looking. So you don't get like my ears were stuck in a rice picker line from Spock in City on the Edge of Forever. And there's no scene of them borrowing clothes from, a clothesline outside or going to Goodwill and shopping for clothes, because they just have a whole wardrobe of modern day stuff on their ship.
Yeah.
So
it's just very convenient.
There's something to that. And every plot line is serious, like serious. Rios is in danger, and then Jurati having to talk with the Borg Queen, and the danger that presents, and then Picard. Like everyone is in some type of peril and danger, but like the stakes of this episode is all of humanity is on the line. So like you could use some levity with them being in this situation. You don't want to go too goofy but in Star Trek 4, the fate of humanity was on the line. And we get scenes like Double Dumbass on You and the punk on the bus. And
Scotty talking into a mouse. Going,
or
computer.
Spock swimming with whales. And
yes, in his undies.
Yes. And Kirk saying LDS, like he took too much LDS, just like so many funny moments. I'm not saying it has to be Star Trek 4 level, but man, give us...
No.
Where's the fun?
Yeah.
And maybe we'll get some more of that. But this episode floundered a little bit for me. But that's what we thought. I'm sure I could talk ad nauseum about some other things. I think this episode ends in a way that we can definitely discuss and sets up next week. Like, I didn't enjoy this episode as much, but I'm still excited for next week, which is a difference between this show and some shows where it ends, in a fashion where it's like, it's set up for next week, but like, I'm not that excited for what they're going to do next week. In this case, I'm excited to see where the show goes and kind of what they're setting up. Yeah. And seeing maybe a little bit more of Q, who's clearly lost his snap ability, his powers, which is not the first time we've seen Q lose his powers. Last time he showed up on the bridge of the Enterprise naked, which is a hilarious episode. But I don't need to see that, but it can definitely be entertaining for sure. And John Delancey, I would love to see him get some more screen time, because I think he's done a phenomenal job with what he's been given. And I just love John Delancey, and he's so true to like that Q character, and there's so much you can do with that character. So, but that being said, Jocelyn, let's go to the fans. We did get another email this week, but it was about Discovery, so I won't touch on that too much. But we do appreciate the comments, the emails, the interaction on the Facebook page has been off the charts just because of everything that's going on and all the discussion and all the theories. And so that's been awesome to see. So why don't you kick us off with the fan comments, Jocelyn?
All right. The first one is from Kevin Leung. I think? Kevin Leung. I'm going with that. Kevin says, it's building up to be a great story. It's going to be a great rewatch when we can see it all play out without the week-long breaks. I really enjoyed the callbacks with the boombox guy, even being the same dude. Some opinions I've heard about Guinan and how she didn't recognize Picard. Basically, the Guinan from the 2024 wouldn't have had that happen to her past, since 2024 Picard wasn't yet even born. Only the present Picard knows that.
I think we'll just...
So that clears that up.
I think so. I think we'll call him Loing Tim. Do you remember? Okay, well.
What?
There's a scene in The Office where Michael Scott has like a keyboard, he types something and it talks, like a text to speech. And he like types in, me love you long. He's trying to say me love you long time, but it says me love you Loing Tim. So when you call him Kevin Leung, that's all I could think of. Oh, man. Okay,
that's funny. That's a deep cut right there.
It's never a deep cut with The Office, if you've seen it 7 times. Keith Danforth says, and he has a little handshake emoji too. I love that when I copy paste from Facebook, it keeps the emojis in there now. It's great. Well, this episode didn't move the needle too far on the overall plot. I thought the performance Ito Geyer gave, I probably butchered that, as young Guinan was damn near perfect in terms of matching Whoopi Goldberg's facial expressions and delivering her lines with the same inflection. Annie Wershing also continues to impress as the Borg Queen, and I definitely got a Last of Us flashback when she was yelling, Agnes! Have you played The Last of Us, Jocelyn?
Have I played The Last of Us? No.
It's like
Is that the one with the little like spacemen looking things?
It's Among Us. The Last of Us is like a post-apocalyptic game with like these like zombie type. It's very good. It's on PlayStation. So
this sounds right up my alley. How do I not know about this?
There's a pretty good story. There's actually 2 of them, but yeah, look at the Last of Us. It's probably pretty inexpensive.
I'll have to check it out.
It's been out for a while. My only gripe this season continues to be Rafi. I feel like they are intentionally sabotaging her character somehow. She always came off to me in the first season as sort of a rugged individualist who probably would have had a Tom Paris-like knowledge of antique firearms, combustion vehicles, and other 21st century culture. This adventure would benefit from her just taking charge and getting things done, but instead she just continues to mope about her relationship to Elnor that we, as the audience, never got to see develop between the seasons. It's bad enough we're down 2 characters. We might as well be down her too and focus on the rest. 8 out of 10 forward avenues.
Okay, that was kind of fun.
10 forward avenues?
Like 10 on forward,
yeah, they did that already in the previous episode, and it just... it's too much.
Yeah, that's true. It's a lot.
The address is the name. That's like a writer coming up with what they think is a clever idea. Like, this is so funny, and then it gets into the show, and it's like, okay, well,
kind of false.
All in a day's work.
Exactly. Chris Rowell says, another solid outing for the crew. Season 2 so far has a knack of filling the intrigo-meter to almost max capacity by episode's end, leaving me anticipating the next episode. Continued character development is high, as are the performances of the ensemble. Alison Pill, in particular, has been extremely impressive to me this season compared to an average showing in Season 1. 8 baffling befuddlements out of 10.
Baffling befuddlements.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Bamboozled, befuddlements, baffling. We got all the B words this week. Wayne Fraser says, this season is doing something that's very difficult to do to Wayne. It's impressing him. Everyone seems to have an interesting and meaningful role to play. They even recast Guinan, and it worked. This show really is hammering home the message of tolerance, diversity, and compassion. It couldn't be more obvious, yet the writing and performance are so strong that it enhances the episode rather than detracting from it. Nothing wrong with those types of messages. In fact, it's the very basis of Star Trek. But I never feel lectured or talked down to as I've felt at times in other shows. The pacing is working too. Jordan joked that we wouldn't see The Watcher until episode 11, and to be fair, that could have been a possibility. But as they ask questions, they don't take too long to answer them, and this episode left us with a few doozies. Doozies? So yes, I did joke about us not getting to see the Watcher until like episode 11, but I said if this was Star Trek Discovery, we wouldn't find out who the Watcher is until the end of episode 11.
Exactly.
But we've had a lot of comments on the Facebook page and going back and forth about the Watcher and a few other things. Like I mentioned, there might be a few comments here, so I might skip that. So I didn't post spoilery stuff because I don't know how spoilery you want to get. But at this point, I think it's just theories for the most part. But yeah, we'll discuss that in a minute.
Okay. Will Flora says, we had to hit a wall. All the episodes have been so good. And I don't necessarily think this one is bad, but it just doesn't really go anywhere. We spend the whole episode floundering around looking for the Watcher or Rios or whatever Agnes and the Queen were doing. Good, not great. But I'm a season that's been so banger. I love that expression. It probably feels worse than it is. 6 ice tasers. IDK. I was fishing with this one.
Barbara Whipple says, I didn't like this episode as well because it's so bleak and I'm tired of bleak. And for crying out loud, aren't 7 Rafi supposed to be undercover? But I really like the punk guy on the bus with the boombox. And I like the idea of... I'm going to skip that part for now.
You are?
Yeah, it's slightly...
Is it a spoilery thing?
Potentially spoilery, maybe. Barbara might be onto something. We'll discuss.
Oh, Barbara usually is onto something, I find. William Jenks has a lot to say, and I will read it now.
We can
William says,
alternate his points if you prefer.
Oh, no. I got
Okay,
this
you
one.
power through.
I'm in it to win it, okay? I'm committed. Just like William is. William says, so many others have commented on how this Picard season is fun, and I agree. It feels easier to digest than Discovery has been this last season. I hope that's not just nostalgia for a handful of well-known characters and that it continues to be so. I don't think this was my favorite of the four, but it was still a good romp, and I enjoyed it. Perhaps that is one of the contrasts to Disco 4, i.e., that it seems to be made more with the intention that it's fun to watch over making a great point. Okay, yes, I get it. ICE is pretty rough, but there are a million TV shows in which some aspect of law enforcement seems unfair, whether justified or not. A few comments where I might be in a little different place than some fans. Number 1. Car chases? I'd have been happy to see the gimmick and then move on. Beaming out of the car at the end was cool, but we are starting to have a lot of unexplained phenomena for the locals to see. Number 2, the Guinan actor was cast well and played a fairly convincing young Whoopi Goldberg, but I honestly didn't buy her dialogue as very young Guinan. I think there's a distinction. Number 3, I got a real vibe of the Oracle from the latter Matrix movies meeting the Observer. I know those movies aren't that popular, and I'm not saying that's bad, just feel like it's been done before. Number 4, the rules on time travel and paradoxes are very complicated at best. As long as the story doesn't obviously violate itself, I just suspend disbelief a bit on that stuff. The stories don't usually work the way that I think they should, which is that I can't go back in time if I didn't already make the visit, so I just try not to worry about it too much. That's why I'm willing to live with the multiple timeline proposition, even though the consequences of that are just as ridiculous and overwhelming. Number 5, and from episode 3. Just from a story writing standpoint, I'm not sure I saw the purpose of bringing Elnor along just to kill him off. He didn't really do anything all that important, or that couldn't have been done by another character before he died. The only thing his death accomplished was to allow us to see a choice of Borg Queen over him. But even that could have been some other choice. With the body in a drawer, I'm working on the assumption that he's just going to be brought back in some semi-magical fashion. That's the one real sour note for me. If they wanted the ensemble smaller, he didn't have to come along at all, or past a brief appearance in the first episode. Okay, I have an Elnor theory, and I don't know if it's a shared theory or what, but I think I know what they're going to do.
Okay.
I'm almost positive, and I'll save it for my next time on.
Ooh.
Ha! That's a tease.
And that's where we'll end this week's episode. No. Jeremy Reed says... So Discovery brings in a non-actor cameo last week with Stacey Abrams. Not to be outdone, Picard continues this thread by having one of the impractical jokers walk in to take Guinan's dog. I will be watching Brian Q. Quinn's political career with great attention. I think the new actress playing Guinan did a good job, but to be honest, the whole Guinan side of this episode really rubbed me the wrong way when I first watched it because of their meeting in Time's Arrow. I get it now, in this timeline of the Confederation, has replaced the Federation in the future, so our Enterprise D never existed, and therefore Picard never went back in time to meet this Guinan. That also explains why this Guinan may be a little more cynical than we're used to seeing. This version never got to meet Data and Picard. She doesn't have the knowledge that mankind will evolve and get better. Hell, I'd hightail it off this planet too if I could. Rafi and Seven are relegated to the longest, most unnecessary car chase I've seen in recent memory. Please, writers, tell me you have more in store for those two actors than just screaming at each other. What a waste of time and talent. Now that we've got confirmation that this takes place in April and the Bell riots begin in late August, early September, us Niners now have confirmation that once again, Deep Space Nine only exists in New Trek as Easter eggs. I'm intrigued with the ending with Picard and the Watcher, Laris, vanishing, and Q's snapping power not working. All in all, I thought this week was okay, but seemed a little more like filler to me. Not Discovery, 3/4 of a season filler, but filler nonetheless. He gives this episode 6 crystal balls.
It's Cristobal. It's not hard to say, Jeremy.
Jeez. All right. Well, thanks everyone for writing in. Thanks for all the comments and the feedback this week. It's been fun to kind of catch up on it. It was a little overwhelming because I got like a Facebook notification, and then there was 9 Facebook notifications, and I'm sitting at work like reading all these comments. Like, holy smokes! It's a little more than I'm used to. So it was fun to kind of read through and see where everyone's head's at, because I think a lot of people were in the same place I was, but there's several people that really enjoyed this week's episode. I think overall the consensus has been pretty positive. For me, this is the weakest of the 4 episodes so far, but I think there's a long way to go, and they've already covered a lot of ground. So, Jocelyn, without any further ado, it is time to rate this episode, unless you have a comment.
Is it?
Are there more comments?
Is it though? Is it though? Is it time to rate this episode?
I think so.
Do we need to do one thing first?
If we must.
We'll make it fast. We'll make it fast. We'll drop into the basement like Rios off of a balcony, and then we'll get out. Okay? Because we're going into the basement where the comments are decidedly
negative.
Yeah. Anyway, we go into IMDb, we find a 1-star review, and we read it, and I'm going to read it now. And this 1-star review comes from Internet Police.
Okay.
No joke. That's their name. That's their online Internet Police. I don't know.
Ironically?
I didn't know that was a thing, but here we are. 1 out of 10 stars. My God, what did I just watch? My God. First off, the stupidity with the whole ice thing is ridiculous. And now they're just recasting characters. I mean, are we that dumb? I am so sick and tired of all the politics thrown in the show that's just supposed to be for entertainment. And that's it. That's the whole comment.
Entertainment.
So, I'm confused. Is that not Whoopi Goldberg?
I thought it was.
I didn't see her.
I mean, we've never really seen her with her hat off. I mean, barely.
It's true. Barely. I mean, the lipstick was the same. The eyeshadow was the same. Those guns she has for arms were the same. I gotta say, young Guinan is fit. Young Guinan can take care of herself. I'll tell you that right now. Yeah. And that's my takeaway from that. Let's get out of the basement.
Please.
Yeah, I'm done with that.
She gave her dog away, though, Jocelyn.
Why? Because she's going off planet,
dogs not going on
like
planets?
Dogs can't go with. She gave it to the Impractical Jokers guy too, which I'm really worried about, because I feel like they're just gonna have him with the dog doing something, ridiculous.
Probably not a great idea.
Yeah, I don't like it. Not very responsible dog mother, Guinan.
No. I thought her performance was fine, but I agree with William Jenks. Like, the dialogue was a little off, and I think it was just not what we were expecting. And it makes sense that she'd be different than Guinan, but like Guinan is just like this wise, almost like Oracle type character that always has insight and like this deeper understanding of what's going on. And in this, they just turned her into another cynical character, which is unfortunate. But I think it's meant to show us how different this timeline is and how much growth she has, and that, I guess, paralleling humankind in this timeline, how much growth that we have ahead of us as well.
Yeah.
So it just, it just didn't play as well as I think they thought it might. And it's just one episode, so we'll see. I think we'll see more of young Guinan for sure.
I think so too.
Well, Jocelyn, without further ado,
coming this fall to CBS.
Hey, and we'll have to review it because it's Star Trek related.
I mean, obviously.
If there's a young Guinan show, I think that's the one that I would not review. Honestly, I'm not too interested in young Guinan. I saw Rascals. That was enough.
That was so good.
That was so awkward. That is so awkward. Like, I remember seeing that as a kid and be like, "Oh, that's kind of fun." But then as an adult, there's some deep stuff in that episode. Like Keiko being in a young child's body, and then O'Brien is her husband. It just like stuff I never thought of.
Yeah, I didn't think of that either. Because I forgot they weren't young versions of themselves. They were just caught in those young bodies. Gets problematic.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, Jocelyn, let us rate this week's episode. What do you give The Watcher?
So, it's still Trek. I still enjoy it. It just was a bit of a disappointment. So I am going to give it a 6 out of 10. I don't have anything clever to say about that because I don't. Yeah, I just wrote down 6, and I think I intended to put something else there.
That's usually how it starts.
I did not. Yeah, and then I went to work instead. So that's me being foolish.
I will also give it a 6, as in I worked 6 days this week, so I feel you on that one. Actually, I'm going to give it a 6. Who watches The Watchers?
Exactly.
We watch The Watchers.
We watch The Watchers.
We're The Watchers. Maybe there's just like a meta thing, like
whoa.
Anyways,
what came first, the Watchers or the Watchies?
The Council give this a score of a 7.53, which brings the overall score of this week's episode to a 6.51. And before we get to our next time on, I will say, if you're looking for like a deeper or further explanation, I follow David Mack on Twitter, who is a author and has written a lot of Star Trek books, and I think penned scripts for a few Star Trek episodes, and he has an explanation. I find it kind of hilarious and perhaps somewhat arrogant that he begins his explanation with, "It's not that difficult, really," and then has like a 5-step tweet that is several thousand characters with graphs and like how this occurred. He's like, there's been some misunderstanding in the timeline. Let me break it down. It's very simple. It's like when
you see, we begin with string theory.
Exactly.
And we end with quantum mechanics, and everything in between is just elementary, my good Watson.
Yeah. It'd be like going to Sherlock Holmes or like a mathematician. They're like, well, it's very simple, really. You take A times B and you find Y and then you square it, and then it's like, what? there's letters in math?
Right. It's bad, but that sounds interesting.
So I will probably on the Facebook page post just screen caps of his explanation, because it is pretty in-depth.
Right.
And I think it gets to the point of what I said in a much longer about way. But it's interesting because he does break it down. I guess in one of the Star Trek novels he wrote, he did write a similar time travel story. I think in one of his trilogies that involves the Borg. So I think they might have borrowed from that, maybe, but who knows? But what happens next time? The fans want to know, Jocelyn, what happens in episode 5?
They want to know. They got to know. Okay, here's what I think for really real happens on the next episode, because I think it's time. I think Elnor died. I think that timeline's Elnor died. Like our prime Elnor is dead and he will not be coming back. However, I think we are going to meet this timeline's Elnor, like the version of him that exists in 2024. It's going to be the same actor playing a character, and they are going to be pivotal to the plot and to certainly Raffi's character development, but they're bringing that like actor / character back, and I think it's going to happen next week.
I'm going to do something that but some podcasts do. Like, what if Elnor's the Watcher? And then the whole cast like, oh wow, that I like that. I like where your head's at. And then they just like run with it. It's like, no, that's stupid. Anyways,
no, I don't think Elnor's the Watcher.
I don't either.
But he's going to be around.
I don't think he's dead forever. I will definitely say that.
I don't think they're going to reanimate. Like, I don't think they're going to Weekend at Bernie's Elnor.
That would be hilarious. I think this, like, when we go back to when they restore the timeline, Elnor will somehow be back. I don't know that we'll see him again in 2024, but it's definitely possible. There's a legless Borg queen traveling back in time by slingshotting around the sun. I'd say almost anything's possible. So I don't want to poo-poo on any ideas, but next week.
No, because then you'd have to clean it up.
Yeah.
And you've already done
I've
that
already
today,
cleaned up
so-
poo-poo today, as we discussed in the
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
Next time
Should
on,
really get that looked at.
we see a real police chase in LA, actually, and it is actually the entire 5th episode, because Seven and Rafi make it 2.4 miles in 45 minutes, because that is what a chase in LA would probably look like with the amount of traffic in LA.
Accurate.
Yeah, that is the most unbelievable part of the episode, is a high-speed chase in LA.
Yeah, that there was any space in between the cars.
Oh, my goodness.
You're right. That was the most unbelievable part.
Well, Jocelyn, that wraps up most everything. I guess we can talk about some theories a little bit real quick. The actress at the end of this episode, when Q is trying to snap and it's not working, that was spoiled on who that character is playing, so I won't talk about that. But there were some theories about who the Watcher might be, and based on just even how like they have that doorway that like whisks away into smoke, that's a similar effect. I believe it was Tyler Harris on the Facebook page that posted. And you may remember this episode. There's an episode in the original series called Assignment Earth, which stars a character named Gary Seven, and it was actually a backdoor pilot in ways for a Gary Seven show, which was supposed to be a spinoff. So it features this character. The Enterprise goes back in time to Earth in present day, of course, like 1968-ish.
Right.
And
of course,
Gary Seven is this agent, and really just the main thing with it is the vernacular that they choose to use with supervisor. Gary Seven is called a supervisor in this episode. He's like supervisor.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'd have to look it up. 194, I believe, something like that. One of the funniest things about that episode is Gary Seven's cat. We reviewed this episode. This was season 2 of the original series, so this was probably about 6 years ago. Gary Seven's cat turns into a woman, of course, an attractive woman. And a black cat.
I do remember that.
Has a little necklace on, and
yes, the
his
necklace.
His name is Isis. So you can imagine a young Connor trying to review, or me and Jeremy trying to review this episode with young Connor hearing the cat's name is Isis. And given world events at that time, let's just say Connor had a field day and lots of laughter.
I bet he did.
So that was pretty hilarious. But Gary Seven is the supervisor, and essentially his transporter beam is accidentally intercepted by the Enterprise. They beam him up, and I think they put him in the brig, and he escapes with the cat and his little,
Yes, okay, I do remember
almost like
this.
a Doctor Who-ish tool that he has, and he's basically there to stop mankind from nuking themselves into oblivion. And the agents who are working the job, I guess, die like a car crash or something. So he is a Class 1 supervisor, and they specifically use the term supervisor. So that's kind of what they're talking about. It's like Gary Seven was potentially a Watcher, and so whoever the Watcher is could be Gary Seven, or it could be, someone of that ilk, which is interesting.
Okay. That is interesting.
So yeah. That's a good episode to watch if you want some more background, should that be the case. You can watch Assignment Earth. It's from season 2 of the original series. But, yeah. It's amazing just how much Star Trek there is that you can go back and, like, pull these things out of there. And just based on the screenshot that Tyler Harris posted, like, when we saw in Discovery, we had, like, the Guardian of Forever come back in Discovery. And that is a very, TOS pull. And we know they're not pulling from Deep Space Nine, so that kind of narrows things down a little bit.
God, the shade is real for that show.
It is real.
It's rough.
But no, that's kind of the majority of what I wanted to cover. I mean, we could go into theories and spoiler town, but I think it's more interesting to watch it play out and kind of let that live on the Facebook page. So if you are out there listening and you have some theories, head over to facebook.com and type in Star Trek Wars Council. We will come right up. You can come in and discuss, rate the episodes, and if you want, you can send us an email at StarTrekWarsPod@gmail.com. And that's pretty much it, Justin. Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap things up?
No, I am more excited about next week's episode after we've talked about this one, actually, and all of that's been pulled in.
I hesitate to ask this, but I was going to ask if you watched The Ready Room this week.
I did not. For the first time, I did not.
I know that they probably went into the timeline on The Ready Room and might have had an explanation, but I'm not watching that.
Okay. Well, when you put the screenshots on Facebook, can you screenshot the screenshot of Facebook and then text it to me?
Yes, for the
Thank you.
theory, for like David Mack, that one, explaining the timeline? Okay,
yeah,
yes, I will just send you the screenshots before I put them on Facebook so you don't have to see the Facebook screenshots.
See, this is why.
I love that you live in
this is why you're in charge around here.
Facebook. Like I screenshot things and send them to you, and it's like you're living in a cached.
It's my own personal Facebook. It's one face. It's my face, and I like it.
I will print off screenshots of Facebook and fax them to you. You old lady, you living.
Great. I'll connect the old phone line and make sure I'm not on a call at that time. Yeah.
I will call you to verify that you're not on a call, and then you can communicate with your neighbor whom you share a party line with, I assume, because it's 1963. Oh what is that Doris Day, Rock Hudson movie? Pillow Talk? Is that the one?
I think it's Pillow Talk where she shares the party line, and then she realizes he's like writing the same song for several different women. He just like inserts all of their names into the same
very
song
Mambo
because he's
number
real garbage.
Very Lou Bega. Not a name I thought I'd reference. Well, Jocelyn, that is it for this week's episode. We will be back to review the 5th episode of Star Trek Picard. Oh my gosh, it's not working. It's
not working? Oh no. I think you're going to have to just press the button yourself.
All right. Computer and program.
Thanks for listening to Star Trek Wars.